Megan Barnes was 26 when she took her own life in 2022. 2 years earlier, she'd been diagnosed with bipolar.
And it's one of the UK's most common long-term conditions. It affects both men and women. Around 1 in every 100 people will be diagnosed with it at some point in their life.
Now, while bipolar disorder can occur at any age, it often develops between the ages of 15 and 19. It takes an average of 9.5 years to get a correct diagnosis of bipolar, and repeat misdiagnosis is common.
We're joined now by Megan's dad, Andy. Morning.
Morning.
Brother Callum. Good morning.
Morning.
And also by the Chief Executive of Bipolar UK, Simon Kitchen. Morning.
Morning.
Andy, how have you been dealing with Megan's death?
Struggling. It's all consuming, is I think the way that I would put it. I think ultimately, you know, the loss of a child is probably up there, if not one of the worst losses that there is ultimately. So, you know, I've kind of thrown myself into physical challenges.
Well, you've been walking, and I mean, was it 2,000 miles?
I've been walking and running. Yeah, I signed up for the Bipolar UK Pole to Pole Challenge, which is a cumulative effort of supporters of Bipolar UK to do the distance from the North to the South Pole. Although I think we're heading on the way back. There's been that many people involved. And yeah, I signed up on May the 13th last year to do 2,000 miles of walking and running. And that's given me a focus which I've needed to try and create a positive out of a tragedy.
We've spoken to the 3 dads here who you'll be well aware of, who lost their children to suicide. Yeah. And one of the experiences that really helped them was when people spoke to them along the way and people shared their own experiences. And I know this would all be very raw, but what were people like when if they'd stop you and just say, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's been more of a kind of solo thing I've been doing most of the time at 6 o'clock in the morning with the dog. So he's not asked me that many questions about it. But, you know, I think generally, you know, what I have found is through my experience is the only people who fully understand what I'm going through or Megan's family are going through are people who've also lost children to suicide.
We'll talk a bit about bipolar in a minute, but Callum, just before, tell us about your sister. Tell us about Megan.
She was really, truly a unique soul. You know, I don't think there was anybody that would ever have an issue with her. You know, that's one of the things that we noticed when we had the funeral and things like that. There were so many people coming up and saying such nice things about her. The ripple effect when you lose somebody is huge. You don't realise how much of an impact you have on people being alive until you experience that loss and you're not here anymore. I think that's one of the biggest impacts that I've seen is how much Megan meant to people that we weren't even aware of, you know, as a family. You know, people doing things that, you know, like insane challenges like my dad, but yeah, that we weren't initially fully aware that they were so close to her.
And although you knew she was struggling, is it possible to know how much she was struggling?
I think, you know, that's one of the things I regret most out of everything is not maybe taking the signs as seriously as I maybe should have done that she was serious about taking her life. And I think it's important, you know, one of the things I'd like people to take on board is when friends are being honest about the way that they're feeling is to take that seriously. You know, if somebody's saying they don't want to be here anymore, take that seriously because it could be one of the last conversations that you have with that person, you know.
Simon, I know you are obviously very familiar with people who are struggling with bipolar, who are living with bipolar. But just listening to what you're saying, Callum, there are lots of people today who are very conscious of their mental health, and rightly so. And I'm kind of trying to just pick up on this feeling that you said, you know, you wish you'd taken it more seriously. I actually don't know how anyone can take it, how anyone knows how seriously to take anything, because it is spoken about so widely today. And I'll say rightly so again, but how do you know when it's at a crucial point? You can't know, can you?
Well, it's really important to diagnose people. And it's really devastating hearing Andy and Callum's story, because my wife, she lost her brother to bipolar suicide in very similar circumstances just over 10 years ago. And the family weren't aware of the risks of suicide immediately after a discharge. It was very similar circumstances. And it's really horrific that these things are still happening. And we're really shocked to find that less than half the people with bipolar actually have a diagnosis.
Well, it takes something like 9 years.
That was a shocking statistic to read out, that it takes 9.5 years to get that diagnosis.
9.5 years, and it's completely unacceptable and completely unnecessary as well. And we're really delighted to be working with the Royal College of Psychiatrists to actually do the diagnosing. They represent the doctors that diagnose bipolar, and they're actually backing our campaign to reduce that delay to at least 5 years within 5 years.
Which, to be honest, sounds way too long.
It's a horrendous
5 years
wait.
to get a diagnosis. And then when you get it, and you can talk about this, Andy, it's about the support, the peer support that can be offered, you know, so that someone like Megan perhaps may have felt, it's not just me.
I think that's my biggest regret with Megan, that I didn't get her involved with peer support. Or I realised too late.
And by peer support, you mean people who have bipolar?
Yeah, I mean, there is a Manchester bipolar support group, and I got in touch with them and arranged to take Megan in on the Wednesday, and she took her life on the Monday. Sorry.
Honestly, it must be such a difficult... Well, I can't imagine a difficult...
But the reason you are here as well, and you don't need to apologise for anything. What you've gone through is devastating. But the reason you're here is you want to raise awareness of this. And Callum, perhaps you can pick up, because you know the impact this has on a family.
Yeah.
And you know the pain that your sister was going through, that Megan was going through, and you want this to not be the case for anyone else. So just by being here and talking about it, someone will be listening.
Yeah, for sure.
And the message you want to get to them.
It's that, you know, there's always, the support is out there. If you need it. I think as a family we kind of needed a bit more of an insight into how bad it could get, and maybe that was kind of missing. But I think these conversations are essential. I think one of the big problems at the moment is maybe some of the funding around the mental health services in the UK, and I think, you know, people don't have as much awareness around conditions like bipolar. They seem kind of a bit niche, but that's not the case, as we can see this morning, you know.
Simon, I was just going to, and Callum's just touched on it there, just a final thought. You took that big, long delay in getting that diagnosis. We know mental health services are stretched, particularly for young people. Is it that? Is it the fact that the symptoms are difficult to put together into a jigsaw to get that diagnosis? Or is it a bit of everything?
Well, the current model of care for bipolar is probably the most inefficient and the most harmful way of doing it, which is episodic care, which is we let people go for as long as possible without diagnosing them. And then when they do go in, we let them, and we don't provide them any support until they become so unwell that they have to go to hospital or tragically take their lives. So what we're asking for is to get that delay to diagnosis down to at least 5 years. It should be a lot shorter, but then to have that specialist support that what Andy was talking about. People need to have access to a psychiatrist so they can get their medication right, which can be really life-saving for people, but also peer support, because the biggest experts on bipolar are people living with bipolar. And within our community, there's thousands of people who have lived with suicidal thoughts, and they've been able to coach other people with the condition to be able to manage it. And it's so tragic that Megan wasn't able to get to one of our groups to be able to have those conversations with people who have actually had those thoughts and managed to survive. So what we would love to do is, because lots of people listening who might have bipolar, go to Could It Be Bipolar? We've got it's not a screening tool, but it asks some questions to help people understand the symptoms. A lot of people are very familiar with the depressive symptoms, the deep recurring suicidal thoughts as well. It's about 1 in 5 people with bipolar take their life unless they get support. but also the manic symptoms, the symptoms of overspending, the symptoms of erratic behaviour in the workplace, the symptoms of hypersexual behaviour. All of those people probably aren't familiar with, and they're not going and talking to their GP about it. They're going with the depression. So if they need to, they need to go to the GP about it, talk to it, and then the GP needs to refer on to a psychiatrist. But certainly the NHS needs to do a lot more on that, and we need to be able to be training up our psychiatrists to diagnose a lot faster, because 9.5 years is completely unacceptable and people are losing their lives because of it.
Andy, what do you do now? Challenge is over, and you've come on to breakfast and we've kind of followed your story as well.
Well, the challenge is finished today as such, but we've got a 20-mile hike next month. You know, family and friends are doing Saddleworth 5 Trigs. We're doing the Bristol Half Marathon in May. I mean, incredibly, some work colleagues of Megan, there's a team of 10 of them, I think, that are doing the Bristol Half for Bipolar UK. So we're going down to join them, aren't we, along with Megan's partner, you know, some cousins and other people. So
doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop.
Continuing to raise awareness.
Continuing to raise awareness, trying to raise money for Bipolar UK through Just Giving pages. You know, I don't think I can stop because it would almost feel like my life would stop as well, ultimately.
Thank you for coming on and talking to us.
Really thank you for having us. I mean, it's incredible that you've given us this outlet to talk about bipolar, because it isn't talked about enough, ultimately.
Thank you.
Can I just finish quickly with a word of hope? Because there's loads of people with bipolar who are leading difficult lives but good lives.
Absolutely.
Getting a diagnosis and support, people can have families, they can have really good jobs, and they can be amazing contributors towards society.
Absolutely.
So it's, getting this right is a win for everybody.
For sure.
Simon Kitchen, CEO of Bipolar UK, thank you. Andy, Callum, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
If you've been affected by any of the issues we've just been talking about, there are details of organisations which provide support on the BBC Action Line website. The address is there on the screen. There's also a phone number as well. Calls are free. You can call any time, day or night, and it'll put you in touch with other organisations as well that can help.